all I kept thinking about was, I'm going to die. I still talk to Jared like he's here every day because love never dies and grief doesn't kill love. And I can still talk to him the same way I always did before. It was hard enough for me to get up and get in the shower in the morning, and I made myself do that. But it was a struggle. Asked Amber in an interview, how are you doing since your dad died? And she said, I didn't just lose my dad, I lost my mom too. And that broke me. They were struggling to survive in a time where somebody should be comforting them and loving them. And I thought, I'm going to spend the rest of my life helping other people.
If you felt angry in your grief and know what the deep darkness is like that consumes every second of every day, then this episode is for you as I sit down with Loren Ridinger, the co-founder of billion-dollar empire Market America and Shop.com, as she explains and takes us through the journey of losing her husband JR tragically. This episode is powerful for many reasons, but I love Loren's raw and honest vulnerability that shines through as she walks us through the true nature of her grief, the selfish nature of it as she still had to parent and grandparent, but also leaving us with hope as she explains how she found her why again. So no matter who you are and who you've lost, this episode is going to leave you full of hope and let you know that you're not alone on the journey. Enjoy. Well, Loren, it's so great to see you again.
I'm so happy to see you, Ryan.
In sunny Miami, because last time you were up there and the clouds were surrounding you and I couldn't see outside your window.
Now it's beautiful. The weather's gorgeous.
And congrats on the book as well. I just want to describe what I got in the book for people listening that want to pick this up. I'm sure they're going to listen to this episode and they're going to go, I need that book.
Available at bookstores everywhere.
It was raw and vulnerable as you would hope in a book about loss and love. But it wasn't just that. It was also poetic. And through the poetic nature of your love story, it was a beautiful, beautiful love story. It was also inspiring in so many different ways. It was inspiring to me as a husband in loving my wife. It was inspiring to me as a father in looking after and loving our daughter. But it was also inspiring as a business owner as well.
I love you. That all that means so much to me. And that's really what I hope that somebody would say.
How has it been received from your closest friends?
I spoke with Serena, who wrote me and said I had a very hard time getting through chapter 1 and 2. I bawled my eyes out. I had to go walk away and take a break and come back. And there are so many lessons along the way. Everybody's been really receptive and really happy, and I'm really grateful for it. But what you just said was most important, and that's what I want people to walk away with. I want people to walk away with a feeling I can be a better parent, I can be a better dad, I can be more attentive, I can pay attention more, I can write a letter, I can handwrite a letter. Somehow or another, we forget to write letters anymore.
Oh my goodness. Do you know what? That was one of my takeaways, and I wrote my wife a letter midway through the book because my dad was big on writing letters to my mum. And it's probably more one-sided in most relationships than the other based on personalities and love languages. And my wife and I write each other notes, and they just the smallest notes mean the world. But I wrote a letter to my wife midway through the book.
How did she feel about that? That must have been beautiful.
Well, it means a lot. She doesn't throw away these letters like you haven't, and it's sitting here on our kitchen counter still.
That's another important message.
So thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. And that's another important lesson. I don't want people to throw them away. If you get even a card from the florist that he sent a message, I would save them. I just think it's so important to keep, and now my grandchildren, I can see them going through our beautiful trunk full of all of our letters. And I can see how they learn a side about their pop-up that they didn't know before. Yeah. And how he was with me. And I think it's so important so they can see how this is how a man treats a woman. This is what I should see. This is what I'm looking for. This is what a real relationship's about. And not that it's perfect by any means. There are good days and bad days, but you work through it.
Amen. Now, I'm going to jump around a bit today. I want to bring it back to you mentioned your good friend Serena Williams. For those who are listening, I saw her just post this morning about the book.
Oh, good! I didn't see it yet.
Yeah, she wrote the foreword for the book, and I didn't know you were such close friends. I also didn't know Serena had gone through loss in her early 20s with her sister. I guess I want to start this conversation by just asking, what was it like and how crucial was it having a close friend who had dived the depths of grief and darkness when it came your time to take those steps and you were thrown into it yourself? How crucial was that, having someone by your side that
Oh,
knew?
Serena was everything. I mean, Serena came every week after JR passed away. She came every week, wherever I was. She stayed with me, and some days she would sit there and I wouldn't speak. And some days she would, feel terrible because she couldn't say the right things, but she didn't try. She just wanted to sit there and be there for me. And I think that was so key. She was like, I'm just going to sit here. You don't have to say anything. We don't have to talk. Just want to be here with you. And, she was that person, of course, who reminded me of why it was so important to forgive myself for, blaming myself for not seeing this pulmonary embolism, for not being in the same room with him at that very moment that it happened. She said to me right in the face, what would you have done had Amber said to you, Mama, I couldn't see Dad. I can't see Dad like that. I can't see Dad dead on the floor. I can't do that. And I remember I said, well, of course I would understand. And she said, then why can't you forgive yourself? And it was an eye-opener for me, and the fact that she had went through a pulmonary embolism and had only been so lucky to have it discovered by her physical trainer and how she breathed. He identified it. And she's like, Loren, you weren't in the United States. You weren't in the dock. You were out at sea. Everything was against you, but I reenacted that moment with her probably more than any other person.
A million times, huh?
The exact moment, the exact painful moment of seeing him. Did he fall on the floor first? Was he on the bed first? You go through this back and forth, and I reenacted it on the bed, not on the bed. And she said, you got to stop. You're not responsible.
Yeah, the hypotheticals will take you out as well.
Oh, it took me out. And I remember that even the coroner had said to me, you do know that when your husband took his last breath with you and told you to stay there, took that breath and said, stay here, that was his last breath. And it didn't hit me at first when she said that. And I was like, come again? And she was like, that was his last breath. He held his breath till he got to that room. He never made it to sitting on your bed, and he fell. And it was that quick, and there was no pain in it. He probably, for a moment, got nervous, like, why am I having a hard time catching my breath? And then he passed out. And
Now, I want to ask you about that, because this is something that I took away, was that coroner said that he died peacefully. Now, your question was, how could you tell that? You wanted those answers, and
I wanted to know if he waited for me. I wanted to know if, because, he told me to stay here, so don't move, Ryan. That's what he told me. So if I were here and you were, 2 feet from me, he said, stay right here. I'll be back. Don't come. I didn't come for a minute because, my husband was the type who, I was the boss in the house. But if he used a certain voice and he'd say, stay here, and he did it like, stay here, like adamant.
You knew.
I don't like the way you sound. He's like, I'm fine. So I didn't know if he had like indigestion. I didn't know if he had acid reflux, which he had often after we would eat.
Sure.
And I thought, okay, I'll give him a minute. And I waited a couple minutes. But I didn't realize that while he held, because I heard that sound. I heard him go, it was like that noise that I'll never forget in my lifetime. I'll know that sound forever. And so I was like, okay. But I was uneasy. And I gave him a few moments. And when he didn't come right back up, and my sister-in-law came through the door and said, oh, I had just told my brother, can you go check to see where JR is? Just moments later. And she came up, oh, he's stretching on the floor doing yoga. I knew that was impossible. I knew I lost him.
Wow.
In that very second, without even seeing him, innately inside me, something told me I lost him. I was destroyed. I was on a conference call still, and I never even hung up. I didn't know that till later.
You just leave, huh?
I left.
Yeah.
And I tried to get this close to him, but I couldn't face him.
Wow.
It took me a long time to forgive myself for that, because I know that if it were me, he would have been trying to do CPR and everything you're thinking of doing at that moment. They were performing CPR on him. The first mate was performing CPR. His best friend Truman Brooks was performing CPR, but I could see his legs, but I couldn't
Yeah.
get closer. I was afraid to see him like that. I did not want to face
Totally.
something.
I don't blame you. And do you know what? We're not prepared. We are not prepared. How could you be prepared for this? All we've seen all our lives are Hollywood movies that lie about what death really looks like. And I don't know about you. I'll speak for myself. When I got a call from my mum saying Dad may have been in an accident, just movie scenes flash by and I didn't even know how to respond. And then the policeman on the phone finally tells me they found two dead at the scene. I wasn't there, obviously. It's like in my mind, I was replaying how should I react based on what I've seen. I wasn't consciously thinking about that. But like, do I scream and break glass and throw things like I see in the movies? How, yeah, it was the same for you.
The same
How
for
do
me. You don't know how to respond.
am I acting? Am I
And
in real
in some
life?
ways, just the thought of seeing him would have made it real for me. So I
Yeah,
was like, it's impossible. He's
because you don't want it to be real. Yeah,
and they were like, we're working on him. We're working on him. You have to stay out of the room. And I remember they were saying like, stay out of the room, but I would still try to inch closer. And then they closed the door. But I was, it was 5 feet between us. It took me a year and a half to forgive myself for that. You hear stories like, where people, they've died and come back. And, I had thoughts like, what if I had grabbed him and told him I'm not ready for you to go? Maybe he would have heard that. But, you can't torture yourself. You have to find it in your heart. And that's why Serena just looked at me. Out of all the things people had said, Ryan, out of all the things somebody said, nobody had ever said what she said to me, which was, what if Amber told you she couldn't have seen her father like that on the ground? Would you have been mad? I said, of course not. She was like, then why can't you forgive yourself for it? And that was an eye-opening moment for me.
powerful perspective.
No,
Yeah.
it was only something that somebody else could have said. And she had said many things like that during this process of, the massage part I talk about in the book when he had a
Yes.
massage. I didn't even remember that till, a few weeks later.
So let's catch everybody up here just on this story. For those who don't know you guys really quickly, you guys built an incredible and have an incredible company in Market America, $1 billion company that has helped hundreds of thousands of people around the world. Offices in 9 countries. I'm not sure if there's more since then, but you've created a phenomenal legacy over 30 years together. This vacation came after you guys hadn't taken vacation, right? You loved being in the business. You loved being with people.
Yes, we had not
And so
been
this
out
was a
in
long
years.
awaited trip.
It was after COVID too, because it was after our 30th convention, right after. He had written me in October of 2021, October 17th, the day after one of our vice presidents had died suddenly, and he was heartbroken. And he wrote me a note and he put it by my bed. And he said, it's time for us to go enjoy our time together. We've done enough. We've done a lot for 30 years. Let's go do it. Because without each other, what difference does it make? Without any time together, what difference does life look like anymore? And we've done enough. Let's go do it. Let's go take some time for ourselves, and we'll come back for the big events and we'll do the big things. But for now, I think it's Loren and JR time. And I wrote him back. And I said, can we wait till August of 2022?
Right.
I wanted to get through the 30th convention. I wanted to put my focus on it. And I explained to him I didn't know. I was so proud of he and I that most companies had never seen 30 years. And he wrote me back and he said, okay, but don't wait past that. Let's go celebrate. Pull out all the stops, throw a big party. 30 years is a big deal. You're right. But I want to go away after that. And so, we had Ben and Jennifer's wedding, Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez's wedding right after. And then 2 days later, we were going to go to Croatia.
So, and you guys wanted that alone time so much so that you actually, didn't invite Amber, your daughter, onto the trip. That's how I read it in the book.
It's interesting. It actually was that he he wanted to go away. He wanted Amber and the kids to go at first, but they couldn't go at first.
Right.
And then into the trip, a couple days into the trip, she said, Dad, I'm going to go to Ibiza, meet you guys in Ibiza when you get off that yacht, because we were going to get on another boat. And that's when he stopped her. And he said,
Right.
don't come. And I don't know if it was that he just knew he wasn't feeling well. He felt like something was wrong. He stopped her from coming, which he had never done. We had never taken a trip alone. We had never, my brother was on the boat, of course, and his wife and our best friend, but never taken a trip without the kids in years. And so when we were on the trip, even on the plane, I remember he had looked at me and he said, I want to thank you for making this happen. I want to thank you for making this happen. I can't believe we're on the plane, because what people don't know is the plane got mechanical problems 2 other times. We had to find another plane to go to Croatia. It was like
gosh.
almost like God was stopping us from going, but we were determined. And so we found another plane to take us there. And he was so grateful on the plane, and I have that photo, and I'll send it to you by text later, but it was just an important thing for him.
And do you feel like, I mean, in hindsight, do you feel like looking back on these small moments, these comments, these letters, these looks that he gives you, do you feel like they had a knowing to them, or is that just the horror of hindsight?
He definitely didn't know he was sick, but somehow or another, Ryan, he definitely got some message from somebody that it was time in the last 48 hours that something wasn't right. I don't know from what power, from where. I've never felt that before in my life. If somebody had told me that before Jared died, I would have said they were crazy. But he definitely did, because I could see it on him. I could tell by the way his text messages right after I lost him to people.
And how does that make you reconcile that loss? Somewhat believing that there was that he had a knowing. Like, how does that make you, like, you wrestle with that? Do you find peace in that, or is it both at different times?
It's interesting. I wish, when he said that morning of, I love you so much, that wasn't unusual for me. Jared would tell me he loved me a million times at night and vice versa. It's what he said that morning about, you have made me the happiest person in the world. When people are successful, as you know, Ryan, you never know where their appetite is. You never know if they're fully satisfied or not, if they're totally happy. And I don't mean with me. I was his favorite person. But, some days you love him and some days he'd hate me. It depends on the day, right? That's marriage. Sure. But we had a great marriage in that aspect. We understood it. But I think what happens is that when people are really successful, and Jared's wasn't about money, it was more about the success of other people. He was never finished. And so I never knew if he was truly happy with where he had gotten, and where we had been. Yep. But in that moment, I thought it was a very strange thing to say to me. And I remember I said, why are you saying that to me? You make me the happiest person in the world too. But it was a very intense, in the eyes, in laying in bed, pillow talk, as you know how important pillow talk is when you're married. It was a very important moment of our life. And I think he was telling me, like, I want you to know you've made me happy if you ever questioned it, which I had. And not me, but just life.
Totally. I get that as a married man. I get that.
You know what I mean? Even just in business, just in anything.
Yeah. And I work, and this is why your story, and I told you this last week, I feel like I'm living a parallel understanding of your story, because I saw my parents, married 30 years, work side by side in similar business with you guys on stages their whole life. I grew up under the chairs in auditoriums, and now I'm working alongside my wife. And so and then losing my dad suddenly, like Amber lost her dad suddenly, and not be there for the goodbyes. I just see so much similarities. And so my heart breaks for you. I feel like I've not your footsteps, but maybe Emma's walked to those footsteps, but 12 years prior. But reading your book, and you and JR had conversations, it sounded like a few times where he would say, one day I'm not going to be here. I'm going to die before you. And you had this expectation that you would die before him. And then all we have to do now is reflect back on some of those conversations, and we
It's
think about them so
crazy.
differently.
It's crazy. I remember a few times asking JR, like, I really did think I would go before him because I have a brain aneurysm that's been coiled, and I
Mm,
check it every year. And, I had some challenges with my health. And so I always thought it would be me. And his parents lived
sure.
till 99, and his grandmother lived till 104. And he thought he would live
Wow.
forever too. But occasionally he would say, jokingly things like, if you date when I'm not here, I'll come back and get you. And I would say the same things. And,
Yeah.
but he would never, the reason I really believed that he thought I would go first is I used to ask him, even though he was 18
Mm,
years older. I would ask him,
yeah.
I said, where are we going to go when we go? Like, where should we be
Mm,
buried? Where should we this? And he never answered the question. He said, we're not going to
wow.
talk about that. Almost as if we would be gone together. I think we both believed that
Yeah.
for a moment.
You think you'll lie down, look at each other, and then you
And that's
both
it.
pass in the same moment. Yep.
I never thought about
Wouldn't
it.
that be nice, huh?
Yes. Wouldn't that be
Like,
amazing? That's why we say, it's funny because even if you've experienced death, when you lose somebody you love so much, somehow or another you end up getting less afraid to die.
mm,
And for me, it's always like I always tell them every night, whenever you're ready for me, call for me.
yeah.
I'm here. And I think it's you know,
And you said that JR would always say that everybody wants to get to heaven, but nobody wants to die to get
said
there.
everybody wants to go to heaven, Lauren, but nobody wants to die to get there.
Mm.
And that
I
was
just,
always so profound for me. And it was true. I never really thought about it that way. How much we all want to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die to get there. And he used to tell me, Amber said it so well. She used to say, our daughter used to say, Mom, Dad always had time on his mind. Time was always on his
wow.
mind. He always used to say, what are
Mm,
you going to do with the dash? Let's do something
mm,
important with the dash, Lauren. Let's stop doing things that aren't for us. We've done so much to help other people. Let's go take our time. So nobody knew that this journey, this final fatal journey was it for us. We were actually going to go right off in the sunset and just go do,
yeah.
the big events for the company and still be involved, but not the day-to-day stuff. But we
Oh
wanted to
my
live a little.
goodness. Yeah. It's so, what you're saying is like hearing words from my own mother. Getting ready to live a little, spend some time with more of the people that you loved. I can hear
And
it
then
just in my ears,
losing her
and then
husband.
losing. Yeah.
And he died
Um,
tragically in a plane crash, right? Which
Plane crash. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but these, you know, and then my wife lost her mum to cancer. Two different, and we would talk about these types of loss and go, man, I losing my dad to cancer, that would have been so hard. Seeing him sick, and she says, well, losing my mum suddenly would have been hard. I wouldn't have had the time with her.
it's so
You can't,
crazy. You can't
you can't.
compare
It's
them.
crazy.
You
Yeah,
can't compare them. But I'll tell you
it's
something happened to
crazy.
me yesterday
Tell
that
me.
was really profound, and I cried. My daughter called me, and one of her best friends, husband, has been battling cancer. It started as colon cancer, but it developed, and usually
Mm,
colon cancer, as we know, can be treated. He's 40 years old, three young babies, and I told her I'd written to him because I've always liked him. We've always connected, and I said, "Are you guys going to come for Christmas?" Because they always came for Christmas. He said, "I'm not doing as well. I'm having a harder time getting around." I said, "All right, come lay on the couch,
yeah.
come be around us. We're going to play games. You can take a nap if you want." And he came, and he came
Oh
into my
wow.
office beforehand, and he told me something that really helped me a little bit. Not for him. It broke me for him. But he talked about how he wasn't prepared and he was afraid
Wow.
and he wasn't at peace yet. You got three kids. It's hard to wrangle up peace in your heart over that.
Oh yeah.
And you got a million questions. Why? Why me? And so, I just try to understand him. I was like, you know what? You're a fighter. You're going to get this. And I got a phone call yesterday that he moved into hospice. And I was
Oh wow.
broken. I started sobbing in the car. And his wife told Amber, and Amber told me that he said he wasn't ready. He
Mm,
wasn't at peace with it, and he was really struggling. And all I kept thinking about was, I'm so glad Jared didn't have to
yeah.
feel that in some
Yeah.
way.
I
That gave me
understand that.
some feeling of rest in my heart. You know what I mean? Just a little bit. It's not a
Absolutely.
lot, but a little bit.
Yeah. And that's what happens when we walk through grief. We now look at things and understand things, and we're grateful for things in such a different regard. Or that's the place that we hope that people arrive at. Obviously in the beginning, it's not one of gratitude immediately. It's
Oh God,
crazy,
you're
but
angry, you're upset.
yeah, yeah. But arriving at a place where we can hear people's stories. Just today, there's a funeral happening at our church. A young man in his 40s, wife, 2 kids, heart attack, died 2 weeks ago. And all of the questions arise. And what about his children? What about his wife? And so your heart expands. And I believe this is why grief and love are so intertwined, because love is expansive. You know, uh, I've only got one daughter, and I think, how could I love any child more than her? And a friend told me, and you will get this because you've got grandchildren, when the next one comes along, it's not that you love that one more than the other. The love just expands. It grows and grows and grows. And that's what happens when love and grief are married so much, that we're able to love in a different capacity for others that are broken, for others that are suffering and hurting, because we didn't know before.
You can't grieve that hard if you didn't love that hard.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
you can't, you've got to expect it. And the problem is, it's all taboo, right? We don't talk about it. We're not familiar with it. You're not prepared for it.
You tried to talk about it with JR, right?
No,
And
he
he said
didn't want
another
to.
time.
He didn't
Yeah.
want to. And I think it was just, he knew. He kept telling me, Loren, we're only here for a fleeting moment. We can't talk about that. We got to do what we got to do. I don't want to talk about that. I just want to live my life with you. And, time was there on his mind all the time. And so I, wanted to know things, and he didn't want to talk about them like that.
Yeah, none of us are getting any younger, right? Like,
Oh gosh.
you mentioned making the dash count, and can you just tell me about that strange, creepy date that he took you on
Yeah, he
when he
took
first
me
shared
the
that with
first
you?
time I'll never forget it. I was in Greensboro, North Carolina. And, I was probably 18, almost 19. And he picked me up and took me to this great Italian restaurant, which I loved. We had no money. He had no money. He had a car with like this broken mirror on the side, which was a little spooky to begin with. It smoked up every time he turned it on.
So,
And he said, I'm going to take you somewhere special. And I was like, where? And I saw him approach a cemetery, and I got to tell you, Ryan, I panicked. I'd only been out with him like 3
Totally.
times, and I was like, what are we doing?
What's
And
this
he's like,
creep
no,
up
no,
to?
I'm going to take you here, keep an open mind. And I was like, all I kept thinking about was, I'm going to die. There was no cell phones back then. If it was, I think it was like that big brick one, really
you would have to run.
oversized.
You'd
I
have
was
to
thinking,
run.
where am I going to go? And he said, get out of the car. Get out of the car. And I got out of the car, and I remember just being frozen inside. And he said, pick anyone. Pick anyone. You want this one, that one, this one, that one? And I was like, I don't want any of them. He goes, pick any one of them. You know what they all have in common? I said, what? He said, they all have a birth date and a death date. I was like, where's he going with this? He goes, you know what else they have in common? That little line between the birth date and the death date. I'm 18, Ryan. I'm thinking to myself, what's happening here? And he says, you can't do anything about the birth date. You can't do anything about the death date. And you can tell God you're not ready, your friends to take your place. They're not going to take your place. But all that matters is what you do with that little line in between. They said, so as long as we're going to go out, we're going to do something with that line. And I thought, okay. I didn't expect it. And I was like, this guy's special, but I didn't know for sure exactly what I was still dealing with. And he said, this place is filled with the most talented people in the world, but most of us have never heard about them because they never did anything with it. Wow. And I don't want you to be and have a life like that. So let's go live our best life. And I remember, I think I fell in love with him by the time I walked back to the car. And
in the cemetery.
In a cemetery.
19
I remember
years
I've
old.
been so impacted by his words. And I remember still thinking he was crazy, but I was crazy for him.
Man, And so you should be. That story will preach. I'd love our daughter to hear that by the time she's 18 or younger. I think a walk through a cemetery can do a lot.
That's so much awakening happens when you walk through
Mm,
a cemetery.
mm,
And I can recall moments of our life that he had done that with like Amber, even with Amber, like, packed her up and took her on a trip and, gave her a little diamond necklace and
mm.
didn't take me with them. And, she would be like, Mom, where are we going? And, she said he just wanted her to know that he was the only man who would forever love her. The first man who fell in love with her, the man who will always be in love with her, wanted to be the first man to give her a little diamond. And that stood by her for the rest of her life. And
Yeah,
that's the type
wow.
of expectations, that
Yeah.
she and her children, can look for with somebody.
Now, while we're sort of on this topic, I don't know if I picked it up or if I missed it in the book, but what you decided to do with JR, was he buried? Was he cremated? I know he'd talked about potential cremation, but
He had
it
mentioned it
didn't
to
seem
me.
like, yeah, but you didn't come to a full agreement together while you were still
It's
alive.
it's
So,
the it's funny because I recall early in our relationship him mentioning that he wanted to be cremated. He just didn't like cemeteries. That's why he
sure.
walked me through it. He didn't
Yeah.
like that these amazing, talented people were there, but did nothing with their life. And he loved the water. And I remember one time when I had said to him, like, shouldn't we go like get a big monument for our family? He's like, we're going to talk about that later. We don't need that. And then it hit me. All those times he had been on stage talking about the dash, all the times he had been screaming at the tombstone and saying, get up, and it wouldn't get up
Mm,
because it was already gone. All those times it's because he didn't want to be there. And
yeah.
so I knew that I would bring him home from Croatia, which, as you know, in the book was a big struggle.
Can we just talk about that for a
Yes.
moment? Because I had to stop and have a second take on this one. It sounds like Croatia were right behind you. They had your back. Can you
They
just
had my
share?
back. They had my
Can
back.
you
It
just
was
share
like,
that?
it was so hard because when I finally um, realized they had taken JR off the boat, I couldn't wait to get back to him. So, I wanted to go to him as soon as they would let me go to the funeral home in Croatia, which wasn't until the next morning. I went there. I waited outside first thing in the morning and I waited there. And, you know, the ambassador of the country had even said to me, Loren, it's not going to be an easy, fast
Mm,
way home. This could take a month. There's no fast track here, I don't think. And I was like, I'm not leaving without him. He's
totally.
not important to you. He's important to me. He's important to our children. He's got to come home with me. I came here with him and I'm leaving with him. And after all of that, 5, 6 days later, a rally of people, David and Victoria, congressmen, senators, friends everywhere had reached out to people. I remember David and Victoria found somebody who spoke, Croatian because it's a different language and I didn't know how to
Oh, wow.
communicate.
So they were all fighting for you to get the
Oh,
best of
everybody was
the
calling
best option.
everybody they
Yeah.
could. Alejandro
Wow.
Sanz, who's a
Yeah.
award-winning Grammy artist, who's one of Jared's best friends, flew there with me. He met me there, and went to the consulate with me, went to the ambassador, went to the funeral home, and so we went every day. Every day I would brush his hair, every day I would change his clothes like he would like, and then I every day they would leave him outside for me in the blowing wind over the water and. I would talk to him for hours. And then they finally called me and
Mm,
said, we think you're going to be able to go home in a day or two, but don't get too excited. And I was like, and my daughter was devastated. All she wanted to do was be with her mom. She
yeah.
was already grieving her father, but she wasn't there with me. So it was really hard on us. And when she called me and told me I could take him home, she said he had to be embalmed first. They were going to drive him over to Split to the
Hmm.
capital and embalm him and then meet me at the airport. I had to get a special plane to bring him home because,
Wow.
they weren't used to letting people just fly him home on a regular plane. And I
And
did.
it's true that he didn't fit.
He did not fit. The pilot came to me and said, we have a situation.
And that's because
Uh,
he was in a special box,
well,
in a
he was
special.
in like a smaller form of a casket, right? So they said, we can't fit him. And I said, well, I'm going to just tell you right now, he's got to come out. He's going to come out. and he can lay on the couch in the front, and I'll check on him, and I'll be there with him.
Oh my
And
gosh.
otherwise, I'm going home with him no matter what. And the pilot was just wonderful. He just looked at the guys with the cargo guys, the baggage guys, and he's like, "I've got this. Let me do this." And I was like, "I'll do it with you." And he's like, "No, I got you." They took him out of the hard box and had him there, and he just was there and flew home with me. And some people thought I was crazy, but I would be crazy if I'd left him. He was my and
How could
he
you
had
sit
to come
on
home
a
with me.
flight for that many hours knowing
No,
that he's
he had to come home
downstairs
with
in
me,
the
and
cargo?
he looked great, and I talked to him so much of the way, and as did my brother, and it was, they gave me all the paperwork, and I got home, and when I landed, the funeral home from my home in Connecticut had met me at the airport in the middle of the night, because that was controversial. There was paparazzi at one airport. We had to direct to another airport, and I didn't want people.
They're horrible, aren't they?
I just didn't want his privacy invaded. I didn't want that.
We had news reporters up our driveway hours after. We had,
it's
and I had to deal with that. It's just like,
it's the last thing you're thinking about. And so
scratching at a story, and the story goes that he wasn't properly.
Yeah, they called me the next morning, and they said, well, I heard people whispering in the kitchen, and I came bursting in the room. I was like, "What is going on? What are you hiding from me?" And they said, "Ma'am, the funeral director's on the phone and wants to talk to you." And I spoke to him, and he said JR wasn't embalmed. I said, "Well, that's impossible, because they wouldn't have let me bring him home. It was a law in Croatia that he has to be embalmed before he can travel with a private citizen on a private plane back to the United States." And they signed all the paperwork, so they definitely did. And I said, "Do you see any entry points?" And he said, "Well, hold on." And he came back and he said, "Yes, I do." And so I said, "Well, stand by." And I called the funeral home right away, and they were wonderful. And he said, "Loren, we tried the best we could, but his blood clot was so long and so stringy, and something we had only seen in a vaccine from the United States." And I knew at that moment, that was the first time it hit me, Ryan, like, oh my God, this happened from the booster. He got the booster June, and this happened
He was
August.
healthy. You guys put
We had
such
just
a
did an
focus on
MRI.
health.
He just did an MRI, just did a full checkup. Everything was perfect. He was flawless. He always had perfect health, actually. He always had perfect blood work. But in June, right before our convention came, in June, he took that COVID booster, the second booster. And when his blood work came back the next time, even though we had just done it a few weeks before, it raised an alarm, and it said his platelets were high, things were high. And I remember I asked the doctor, and I said, "What is this? Should we not travel anywhere? What's going on here?" And he goes, "Oh, no. He probably had coffee. Maybe it affected the results, or had breakfast. JR's fine. Look at his history. 2 weeks before, his blood work was fine. It just changed after, right?" So I was like, "Are you sure? Are you sure yes, we're fine. We'll deal with it when we come back, and we'll retest."
And it's why you could have had no idea on that boat. It's why his long-standing knee, issue seems like the problem, but it wasn't the ultimate problem.
It felt like it was his when his knee was hurting, it was just the injury, the sports injury he had for years. And so I didn't even think that that's where the blood clot was hiding after I was told that later, after the fact.
Totally.
I would never have known that.
Yeah, with all of my injuries in my sporting, life, there's no way I would assume something like that. No way.
I didn't even know that that's actually where blood clots would go. You know what I mean? Behind the knee, where an injury was. And so I learned that after the fact. But when I went back in hindsight, and I went there right away to the funeral home to see JR, he said, "Well, he's somewhat deteriorating." And I could see what he was talking about. And I went to him, and I could definitely see the entry points. And I could definitely see where they did everything they could to do exactly what they were supposed to do. But in many ways, Croatia and the team there had helped me get JR home, because had they had not done and signed that piece of paper, I would have never been able to bring him home.
Wow. So they signed off on it.
They signed off on it, and it changed, I was able to bring him home to his children, his family.
There's so many of these forever grateful moments that happen in our journey.
I cannot tell you how many moments that I've been so grateful for, and that even though they're in grief, you find a way to find some peace in them and be thankful for things in grief, which is crazy.
Yeah, Crazy. Yep. So a lot of our audience have, come out the other side of COVID, losing many loved ones for both sides of the fence. Um, how did it really affect you knowing that it wasn't a heart attack and it wasn't about his injury and it wasn't about his health? Like, how did
It
that
pissed
hit
me
you?
off. It pissed me off. I was pissed. I was pissed because, in the final, he had that vaccine booster in June, and then in July I could see his knee was stiffening. And I kept
Sure.
saying to him, are you okay? Is everything okay? Like, we have a big home in Connecticut out in the country, and I would see him walk up the hallway, and I could see that his knee was stiffening. And he said, I want you to know it doesn't hurt. I don't want you to worry about my knee. He never liked me to worry about him. He said, it's stiffer.
But not hurt.
And,
Mm,
but he took it. And, I think we were made to be so panicked and
I
forced
agree.
to do something in a way that we would never do if we had the time to really think about it.
Yeah.
When do we take something
Totally
that's
agree.
not tried and tested?
Yeah.
And JR was the guy who would never do that, but we were just believed that we were going to die if we didn't. And that's what happened. And I was mad and I was angry and I didn't handle that well. I was mad at myself because why didn't I see it? And I wish many times I had taken the booster. So, I could have been with him. I was angry.
And that, yeah, yeah. I'm hearing, and I feel as well. And they're all the what ifs. What if? Why not? I mean, through reading your book, I'm glad that you found a way out of that area because it's such a dark place to be. It doesn't mean that those thoughts don't come to you still. I know, but like when those thoughts are every thought, man, that's where it's absolute
I
torture.
I spent a year and a half practicing falling off the edge of the bed to see if he sat on the edge of the bed. And if he fell,
Wow.
would he fall this way or this way?
Mm,
I practiced hearing his breath. I Googled. I, relived it with the massage. I wanted him to relax. 2 days before he died, Mark, my brother, told me what a great massage he had. I said, Jared, have a great massage. Then when he had the massage, and then after I found out it was the pulmonary embolism, I Googled.
yeah.
Yeah,
As you do. You go on every rabbit hole possible.
which was weird because Ryan, at any other time, he loved massages.
Sure, of
So I
course,
was
yeah.
pissed
But he
because
wasn't himself at that
oh,
point.
I was mad, and I said to Serena. Serena saw me right away. Google it. She said, "Stop,
Stop, yeah.
stop,
And I'm
don't do that."
curious, did you then, knowing the reason, fear for everybody else around you for that same reason? Did you have that that hypertension about this could happen to you? Have you been checked out? Have you, did you have that?
I didn't have a moment where I really could think about anything like that. I mean, I'm not
Sure.
gonna. I was very clear to make sure I told everybody around me not to do it. That I was very clear about. I asked people how many vaccines they had had, how many boosters they had. I tried to
Yeah.
stop people from doing it, but I couldn't really worry about anybody but myself. I
No.
was in
Yeah,
such
no,
a
totally.
deep, bad
Yeah.
place.
I guess what came to mind was every time I would see my phone ring and it was my mum or my brother after dad died, I thought something was wrong. Like immediately I
Oh.
thought that was another phone
Now
call.
that's something I have still happen. Like
Sure.
if I see somebody bump their head, I panic. If I
Yeah.
see, that somebody trips and gets hurt. And it's funny, Aiden, my eldest grandson who's 11, said to me the other day, he said, Mimi, he fell on the shower and I came in there and he slipped and he was fine, he got up. I
Yeah.
panicked. They
Yeah.
said, Mimi, can I ask you a question? I said, Jay said, why do you panic when I'm okay? I said, because, I want to explain it to you so you understand. And I said, when Pop thought he was fine too, he walked away and he wasn't fine. And he looked at me and he said, thank you for explaining that to me. Now I understand why you panic. And I do. I panic because I think it's inevitable. You go through
Yeah.
this. Anything that could go wrong, I just want everybody to stay safe in this little box for a
Absolutely.
moment, right? But I remember when he said that to me, he thanked me. He said, thank you for explaining why. I get it.
Mm. Let's talk about therapy
No.
because, I've been there. I've had good therapy. I've had not so good therapy. It sounds like, you took advice from people. You went and saw therapists. But can you just tell us about
I
that
did.
experience you share in the book?
I never had therapy in my whole life. JR used to have a joke, you don't need therapy. I'm your therapist. We always had a joke. And not that I didn't understand it or respect it, I just never did it. And Amber said, Mama, you got to get some help. You're not doing well. You got to get some help. All you're doing is working. And you cry and work and cry and work. You got to get somebody to help you work through this. I said, what do they know? How can they help me? She said, well, I found somebody. First, she found somebody from her church that she knew could help me. And they were lovely. Actually, when I think about it in hindsight, she was probably the loveliest and the kindest of all and very sensitive. And I was doing it 3 days a week. And, I was struggling. And so I went on to another one and I got nothing. It was worse. And the third one or the fourth one was, this very nice guy. Seemed to be more of a, somebody who was overall experienced with everything. But he had said something one day that was it for me. He said, you can date if you want again. And you can start to date again. Things can get better again. And I was like, mm-hmm. And I was like, you know what? Somebody just called me on the other line. I have to take this call.
I'm
I
out.
hung up the phone and I wrote him a message and I just said, I'm done. And I never did the therapy again at that
And
moment.
wasn't that only a couple of months after JR's
It was just 6
passing?
months later about. And I just was bothered. I was really bothered that I felt like it wasn't his place to bring that up. That if anybody were to bring that up, then let it be me. But I'm not the one who wanted to bring it up, so I didn't want to hear about it from somebody because I don't think, everybody's relationship is different. And maybe his relationship with his wife wasn't the way my relationship was or the way you and your wife's relationship is or your mom and dad's, how I know how they were. And so I just felt like it wasn't his place to comment, and it turned me off. And so it wasn't until, a couple months later that Serena.
Yeah, and I want to get to that because it's so powerful. But I mean, how long were you and JR? I mean, you still are married.
30. We were together 36 years.
36
married
years.
Since 1996.
Wow.
So
you just can't. In 6 months, you just can't. Like,
I can't even
what
think about it. It
place-
doesn't even phase
Oh
you.
my
It's not
gosh.
even it's not even on my radar.
Yeah.
It's not even on my radar. It's not even a part of my being. And
Yeah.
so, and I'm sure he meant nothing by it.
Of
But
course.
again,
he's
unless
working through the motions.
unless you have it, I wanted to say you must not be married for that long, but I didn't.
I'm glad you didn't.
I didn't do it, because you in grief, you can get nasty,
Oh yeah.
and you can feel bad. You can be angry and you could want to take it out on everybody around you. And I've had that too, but you just learn to get through it.
So last week we were on the phone. I asked you a question. I said, what's something you feel people are fearful of asking you and don't ask? And you said, when will Loren date again? Or will Loren date again? So I want to ask you, will Loren date again?
I don't think so. It's not in my, I don't have any desire. I'll be honest with you. I don't know what the future holds, and I'd never say never to anything, but right now I would say never because it's not in my forefront of my mind. I still talk to Jared like he's here every day. I'm still, living and breathing what our dreams are and what we wanted to happen. And Jennifer Lopez said to me once, and I'll never forget it, once you have the type of love that you had it. Yeah. You don't have to search for it anymore. And I feel so blessed to have had it. I feel so blessed to have somebody who rooted me on, who loved me, who I was his favorite person, and who wanted me to win and succeed even when I didn't believe in myself. Somebody who encouraged me. And so for me, it's like, I truly believe.
That is the jackpot, isn't it?
That's the jackpot. And so when you have it, how do you compare anything against that? How do you put anything up against it? So I found love in my friends and my children and my work. And that feels really good where I'm at right now. And I think you understand what I mean when I talk about, because you've experienced grief, is is that when you feel okay with where you're at and you're not looking for anything more other than just to be the best version of yourself, then you're okay with that and you accept that for what it is.
And do you feel like your relationship with JR has grown since he died?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It's so funny you say that. Amber wrote me a letter on Valentine's Day last year, and she said, my relationship with Daddy is stronger than ever.
Isn't
As
that wild? I feel the same way.
couldn't believe that.
How is that possible when
And
you
I
hadn't
said,
lost
how is
anyone?
that? And she
Yeah.
said, because love never dies and grief doesn't kill love. And I can still talk to him the same way I always did before. And we're all made of energy, Mom. He's still right here with me. And she said that their love has grown. And I really never heard it like that, but I believed it with all my heart because I felt it with all my heart. I knew I experienced the same feeling, but I couldn't quite put it into the same words. And now I get it.
That is a powerful, powerful revelation that I could have never seen that on the side of the fence pre-grief, pre-loss. You could have never seen that. You could watch a movie, you could read a book, but never understand that.
How could it grow? How could it grow? But it does.
How?
It grows.
Can we just talk about parenting? Because you've been on the side of losing a parent, and now here you are as a parent losing a spouse, but you've got a daughter to care for. But you said that Amber organized the schedule. She just cared and cared and cared. She organized the schedule and friends to babysit you in case you did something harmful that she thought could have happened. And I thought the same thing about my mom taking sleeping tablets to get through the night. But Amber said this. She said, I know you don't want this, Mum, but you're not the only one who lost Dad. And I can't lose you too.
It broke me.
Yeah, as a parent, like, how did you face that realization of like, I've been selfish, which is natural.
I've been awful. I had been awful. And when I say it openly and honestly because I want this book to be about real feelings and not trying to hide things. And here is a person who everybody used to say, Jared would be like, you take care of everybody. For the first time in my life, I couldn't. It was hard enough for me to get up and get in the shower in the morning, and I made myself do that. I made myself get dressed every day. But it was a struggle. But everything else is like living in a fog, as you know. So I forgot that I wasn't the only one grieving him. And although mine might have been such a different type of pain, I forgot that this girl had this man that she looked up to, who she loved, who was her father, and that she loved him. And I had a hard time connecting with it because even though when I lost my dad, I was sad and broken, I didn't have that with my father. Yeah. So I'd forgotten it for many reasons until I'd also seen a tape that somebody had played for me where they asked Amber in an interview, how are you doing since your dad died? And she said, I didn't just lose my dad, I lost my mom too. And that broke me, and it made me realize I had to do something to see her pain and to help her go through it. And I, tried very much to acknowledge her in the book for that. And a lot of my friends called me and said,
job.
Yeah, a lot of my friends called me and said that was one of the hardest parts of the book because it was so painful and powerful at the same time.
Now, before things, you brought them to, reconcile those with her and go on the journey together. Sounded like there were some tense times.
Yeah, it was tense. It was tense. I mean, she really spent her time after JR passed away really organizing the schedule. And at first I was angry. I was like, I don't need people sleeping with me. I don't need people staying with me. And, she had a schedule, like Mary spending the night one night, Natalia spending the night
Tuesday,
another
Wednesday,
night.
Thursday. Yeah.
And she didn't care. Like, I didn't want, she's like, it doesn't matter. It's what I need to feel like you're okay. I need to know you're okay. Just don't be that selfish, Mom. Give me that. I need to know that you're going to survive. And I remember when I came back from Croatia, and my brother, Mark, I remember when I was in Croatia, and I finally got up like on day 3 to take a shower. And I was trying to get out of there, hoping they would call me to go home. And I remember my brother peeped his head in the door and said, are you okay? But he, was quiet. He didn't look inside. And I said, Amber really wants me to check on you every few minutes. And then when I would be sleeping, he would check my breathing on my stomach because Amber would write him, can you make sure she's breathing? If I fall asleep for a moment, I was rarely sleeping. And what she didn't know is that, the doctors there had given me some sleeping pills, none of which I took. And I was hiding them in the sofa, because I didn't want to take them. I wanted to be very aware. I was
Yeah,
going through this battle, this pain, this
sure.
terrible thing that I couldn't suppress. There was no way to take a pill and make it go away. It was her way of showing me extreme love, but also to make herself feel better. And I was awful. I was like, I don't need this. I don't need that. And you don't realize how you can act sometimes. And it was
Mm,
painful to her, I'm sure.
mm,
And still, occasionally, now she knows I've done better. And, she'll always say to me, Mom, don't be more than a couple days alone. Don't stay in the house
yeah,
more than a couple
yeah.
days alone, because it can get you.
She's a wise daughter.
It can get you. I can catch myself on day 2 or 3 and I've been alone too long and
Hmm.
it's a big house alone by myself. And the worst part is,
Haven't seen the sun
Ryan.
in a while. Haven't
Oh,
exercised in a bit.
you haven't walked my steps and,
Yeah.
nobody to talk to. And I'm dealing with things in my head like, what should I do with this? And how does the business look
Hmm.
here? And what should I do with the business here? And even though things are growing and flourishing, you still question what you're doing. And that person, like you and your wife, you have that discussion at night
That's
together
right.
when everybody's asleep, right? There was nobody to do
But
that with.
you can't have that discussion. I know.
A
Yeah.
worst part of grief, I think.
Yeah. 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 My mum over the last decade, at times she'll just blurt things out or vent and then apologize and say, sorry, I don't have anyone at night to share this stuff with.
Oh God, I
And
feel her so much.
yeah.
I feel that with all I am.
And
I
you mentioned
feel
pillow
that.
talk and how important the pillow, that's when you have the discussions and you solve the problems of the world. And so,
He and I was, and that's the other thing in the book. We're always in a rush. Like I was in a rush. I was trying to fix the problems of the world, whatever the problem of the day was, and they really aren't
mm-hmm,
problems. At the end of
mm,
the day, I never
mm,
faced a crisis until I lost JR. So as
yeah,
many crises as we say we have on a daily, I never experienced it until I lost JR, until you lost your dad.
yeah.
We don't really know a crisis till then, right? When you really think about it.
The way I've looked at it recently is like a magnifying glass. Death happens, this magnifying glass gets thrown over the top, and that's what brings the important things into focus. Finally, we've lived our whole life and not thought about the most important things, having those conversations, spending the time, just enjoying the quiet moments. You
And
mentioned,
he said that, by the way. He would say to me every morning, right when I get out of bed, he said, "Don't leave yet. I
mm,
know as soon as you leave, I've lost you for the day."
mm,
And I used to say, like, don't be silly. I'm right in the same room with you. I've worked with him every day. I'd be in the same
I
room.
found I found that so inspiring, I have to say, because as a business owner, what I mentioned was inspiring was to know what you guys have built, the foundations that you'd laid over decades, and for him still to say, "Don't leave. This is our sanctuary." Before all of the stuff enters your mind, the emails, the phone calls, I just thought, wow, this JR is a man who had his priorities in order from the moment he woke up. And I found that personally inspiring and something that
And,
I want to take on, even though I'm
and I
building a
think it's
business
such
and looking
a
after a young family.
beautiful, beautiful gift that I've received. And
Mm,
it's like from the time he would go to bed at night, he would say to me, "I'm going to go to bed. You're going to come?" And I was like, "Yep, I'll be there in a few minutes." And he would write me like 10 minutes later, say, "I can't sleep without you. Can you please come?"
oh,
And that was our moment. And he
yeah,
treasured that. And,
yeah,
and, and sometimes I got angry at myself. Why did I let the world interfere with that moment? And so I
seriously.
hope that the book tells people to not do that. The things
Mm.
not to do, that you don't have to lose somebody like I did or you did in order to change things right now.
Oh, the book is 100% not only choose this direction, but it's also don't go down this path as well.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
both, and it's a beautiful marriage of that. Um, you mentioned Amber was the one that encouraged you to therapy. Serena was the one that encouraged you to a local grief group against your will. But I wanna read this that you said in the book. You said you'd noticed when you entered that room that all of the women there had lost something significant and irreplaceable, and in that semicircle, you rediscovered your why. So I guess my question is, I want to know, what was it about being surrounded by a small group of women in a dingy old hall, it sounded like,
Yeah.
all
Was
sharing
it
similar losses? What was it that helped you rediscover your why?
You know, it's so crazy because when I walked in that room, and as I approached the room a million times, I thought, why am I walking in here? and I wanted to avoid it. And I walked in, I remember I walked into another room first, and it was the wrong room. And I kept thinking, that's my sign not to go.
I'm out.
But I turned around, and there was another door open, and that was the room. And they saw me, and they invited me in. And I didn't, like most, people, I was shy at first. I didn't want to speak. And I was really lost, And I was quiet, and he asked me to introduce myself. And I said, I'd just like to listen at first. And I listened to everybody's stories. I listened to who they were and who their husband was and what they'd lost and how I didn't just hear the story. Some loved their husbands more than others. Some were, in the process of a separation, believe it or not. They were all grieving in their own way. But one thing I heard from all of them was things like, I have to go back to work. I've never worked a day in my life. My husband took care of everything. I can't afford the light bill this month. I can't make the mortgage payment. No, I can't make ends meet. And for the first time, I heard something that somebody lost that I didn't.
Wow.
And I can't tell you, Ryan, in that very moment, I remembered my why. My why was there to help people change their life, that I had the ability to do that, and I had done it all those years with JR. And all of a sudden, everything came flooding back in that moment and reminded me of what I had been doing for 30 years with my husband and what I got my most joy from and why he and I loved doing what we do. And so it hit me, and I was like, I'm going to spend the rest of my life helping other people have a plan B, have a person to talk to, have something else that they can do, because this is what I do. And I'm fortunate enough that I didn't have to worry about not how I was going to send my child to school or pay for my grandkids to go to school or paying a mortgage payment or losing my car. I knew in that moment, I couldn't imagine that having to deal with grief and then on top of having to just be thrusted back into survival, that I would help people not only survive but thrive. And so I'm going to spend the last moment of my life doing that.
And that's what making the dash count means.
It really does.
I love Serena's part to play in your life and your journey so far. What would you say to other women losing a husband, a parent, a child, brother, whoever? What would you say to them about taking that step of faith and courage towards another group, a group of women? Like, what would you say?
I would say that you're not alone. And it's so important to listen to other people's stories, because that was the one story that reminded me of my purpose. And I'm not sure if I would have remembered it had I not have gone, had I not have listened. And Serena didn't mean to send me that. What she sent me was a beautiful passage. And when I clicked on it, it was an advertisement for a local group. And I told her, I said, should I do this? She said, you should go for it. And I did.
Amazing.
And I did. And she was like, why wouldn't you? You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. And I thought, she's right. And maybe interacting with other people who lost somebody like you have. And so you're in that room. And as you know, Ryan, when you lose somebody you love, sometimes like you said with you and your wife, you're comparing, does it hurt more to have it this way? Does it hurt more in grief this way? Or is it worse to lose, I love my wife more than you loved your husband. And people compare their losses. And really, they're all different. And we don't know what people walk through and what they go through.
Yeah.
And it was the best thing I did.
Yeah, did you find those natural comparisons sitting in that room more helpful than hindrance? You're comparing because you naturally are, but it sounds like you found them way more helpful to compare and hear those stories than
it really was a light bulb for me. It was a light bulb for me. I heard their stories well. And the light bulb that went off is that they were struggling to survive in a time where somebody should be comforting them and loving them and helping them as much as they could. And I thought, I'm going to spend the rest of my life helping other people have a backup plan, having people have a person they could speak to about grief, having a friend to talk to, whatever it was. I wanted to be that one. And I would spend my life doing that.
I'm right there with you. That's why we started Good Grief. That's why you and I are having this
I
conversation.
know, and I
And
love what you do. I love Good Grief, and I was following you before you knew who I was, and
yeah,
because it
it's
was a
crazy.
source, it was a source of help, and that's the other thing I would tell women. I would say seek help, and when I
Mm,
say seek help, it didn't always mean having to talk to someone physically in person or on a Zoom call. I sourced out you. I sourced out your wife. I sourced out what you guys had on there that comforted me in many ways. And I can't tell you, I have like a whole save file I'm going to show you a picture of. That's all of your post of so many posts
wow.
that resonated with me that I was like, oh my God, I'm not alone. Somebody feels the same way. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think that although we feel so alone in grief, I always felt like the message is that we're actually not alone. And there is somebody who understands us. And while some may not feel as strong in their pain of grief or their journey may not be as harsh, there are others who are the same or worse. And so it depends on the circumstances. And I have found that, those messages that you all would put up online were so powerful to me and they would resonate with me. And those were my hope. Those were my
Wow.
hope that people can survive, but still know this. Still know that it feels terrible today. And I feel like I've been punched in the gut. And nobody else in the world understands that. But somebody else out there does understand it
Mm,
besides me.
mm.
And I think that that's so important to know when you feel in such a lonely space. You can be
Well,
in a room, as you know, during grief and have a whole room full of people and not see a single one of them.
100%. Yeah. They don't see you and you don't see them.
You just don't know. And you're in such a sad place and you feel so alone. And so when you can resonate, for me, it was finding posts, finding groups right online that were leaving messages because I could see comments. I would read people's
Yeah.
comments. Then I'd start following them. I followed more people in my grief than I'd ever followed in my lifetime because
It gets pretty wild. Let's be honest. You start, and then your whole feed is full of
no, and not just
things. And
that, and it's just the new friends you make and the people
yeah,
who understand.
they're the
And yes,
blessings.
you're
Yes.
you're definitely your feed is totally different, but I was okay with that. I just wanted to find people who could relate to what I was feeling, and
Totally.
I realized that it didn't have to be somebody who lost a husband either. It could be
No.
somebody who
Yeah.
lost a mother, a brother, a sister. Anybody who had experienced pain like I had.
And what I always say is that grief unites us far more than it divides us.
Oh
And obviously,
gosh.
that's what you're echoing right now. And I just want to say thank you as well. Like what you just shared really blessed me. And I'll definitely make sure, Kaylee will listen to this, but I'll share that sentiment with her because it empowers us. We want to see a million women find meaning again after a loss. And your story is a big part to play in that. So I
And
want
I
to say
think
thank you.
I want to thank you because it really was, you know, your page that I went to for my source. And I
Wow.
think sometimes people think it's got to be a person. And that's why I say sometimes less is more when you're saying
Mm,
something in grief. Because you don't know the right thing to say. I said it in the book that many times people would say, I hope you're feeling better. And I just hated them after that. I put them
yeah.
on
It's
block.
not a sickness.
And
Yeah.
it's not a sickness. I wasn't ill. And I know it's not their fault. They didn't mean any harm by it. But it's like, come on. And so sometimes I would just go to your page, be like, Good Grief has a message for me. And sometimes that would be the source of your strength. And it's
Wow.
true. It's those little things that help you each day. And you have to seek them. If you don't
Hmm.
seek them, you will not find. You have to seek them. You have to look for them. You have to be able to want to help yourself up enough to be able to say, you know what, there's somebody else that is feeling like me and will listen to me. And I started following you long before you guys followed me, and it was so helpful to me.
Preach it. I was going to just stay as quiet as I could there for as long as you wanted to just
It
share
just, I
because
mean that with all
the,
my heart.
I know you do.
I really mean it with my heart because, as you know, in the book, the actual one-on-one with therapists wasn't working for me.
yeah,
It wasn't. I tried, Ryan. I tried. What I seeked was somebody like you or your wife who would share messages from yourselves or other people
mm.
that I could read the comments and be like, oh my God, there is somebody like me and I'm not
Well,
alone.
that's how we grow through life. Yes, I have got a therapist. We're going to be meeting with him tomorrow. We've got a workshop with him with our Good Grief Club members, right? So I'm for therapy, but I believe true growth happens in all areas of life when you're surrounded by a community, whether that's a faith community to church, whether it's a sporting community, whether
Or a
it's
community like
family, business.
mine.
100%. Yeah. And that's where true growth happens. The Bible says iron sharpens iron, and you can only sharpen one another when you're walking on the same road or when you've been through something
100%.
somebody else hasn't. So look, the final piece of my notes here is just titled Hope, because you, in your book, you just take us up a few gears higher and leave us with hope. And I just want to read a passage here and a few thoughts that I've collected that really spoke to me. You got a chapter, it says, the lesson, grief is not all bad. I want to read that one more time. The lesson, grief is not all bad. Somebody needs to hear that today. You said this: grief doesn't diminish love. It sharpens its presence, etching it into our souls with the clarity we couldn't perceive before. Moving forward isn't about letting go. It's about embracing the transformation of love as it persists in new forms. Love doesn't fade with time, it deepens, creating a well of resilience and grace that we draw from day after day. By allowing love to guide us, we find strength to transform grief into growth and loss into legacy.
That's what I'm doing. That's all I'm focused on. That's my life from here till I get to reunite with JR again. So that's what I'm doing. That's the focus for the future. That's what I've got to do.
I don't know if it could have been said any better, Loren.
Thank you. Turning love into loss into love into legacy. It's what my whole life is about now. It's grief into growth, and how I can be the best version of myself, and having, grace on myself at the same time, and not feeling bad if people are uncomfortable with me talking about it. That's not my problem. And I told you that, if somebody's uncomfortable with my grief, I tell them I'm sorry. That's not my problem.
Yeah.
It's not. I have to live my truth. And, part of this journey, Jerry used to tell me, we have to turn our pain into purpose. And I'm trying to do that for us,
Well, you are. This book is just the start of an incredible chapter of your life. And I want to thank you for spending the time with us. In the book, your final love letter, you sign off saying this: I love you forever. I believe in you, and I believe in me. Finally, yours always, Loren. And Loren, that belief that you've come to now have in yourself, I can hear it resonating with so many of our audience listening in on this podcast.
Thank you.
I think that is one of many beautiful, empowering, and encouraging aspects of your book. We're going to be shouting it from the rooftop.
Thank you.
I haven't read a book faster in my life before.
I love you. You're the best.
So.
You're the best. Well, I think we hit it off right away, and we both have had so many similarities in our journeys with our parents and
Totally.
and us. And I really appreciate you feeling that. And those words at the end, I felt with all my heart, and that's why they're there. And I do. I finally believe in me again.
Love that. Well, Loren, bless you. Thanks for hanging out with us, and let's do it again soon.
I appreciate you so much. Thank you, hon. I'll be back again, I hope.